Our next speaker is an accomplished and certified data protection and privacy officer with extensive experience in the security industry. With a career spanning 30 years, he has successfully led multiple global government data and physical security design and implementation projects, specializing in enterprise technology and Java software development. Let's all welcome the Chief Information Security Officer of Orange and Bronze Software Labs, Mr. Brady Hiscox.
That intro video is pretty full on. Hello everybody, I'm Brady Hiscox. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer for Orange and Bronze. I've been living in Asia pretty much my whole life, and I was asked to speak about modern application security and threat mitigation. And I'll talk about a few other things that I think are really important and relevant to the subject. Basically, in the modern software environment, people are just starting to think about data security when they should have been thinking about it from the beginning. I keep on reading the question and answer box. What people need to do is now they need to look at the whole environment and the whole infrastructure as a holistic solution, thinking about the security of their applications while they're developing them, and looking at the tools and libraries that they're using to build those applications. One of the main things that people are using is a lot of free libraries, like anything from NPM, any repository libraries, and a lot of those have been poorly written, and they need to always be checked with security in mind, using tools that we'll talk about a little bit later. But also, you need to think about the infrastructure that you're putting your applications on, securely deploying them, and basically thinking of it as a holistic solution to really make sure that everything's tidy, everything is stable. That's another thing that's really important, of course. And that you are not going to basically breach or leak any personal information data, and that's really important here in the Philippines. The data privacy laws are pretty full on here. First, let's talk about the application side and the development side. There are a lot of good tools that are out there now, like Sneak. Amazon's got Code Guru. They should be enabled in your development process to help check things as you're writing the code for good code consistency, as well as the integrity of the application itself. The other thing that people don't think about a lot of times is the API. The APIs that they're using usually have been developed, and there are a lot of legacy APIs that are out there that are just basically open doors to walk through. The APIs are probably one of my favorite ways to break into something, actually. So you should always run your code through static application testing, things like SonarQube, Checkmark, basically making sure that you're not forgetting any of the basic fundamentals of security, which besides just the actual intrusion and possible theft of your data, the downtime, especially in some of the industries that I deal with government, with casinos, downtime is tangible. Like, you can quantify the monetary loss by the minute. Um, uh, MGM globally just was hit with an attack that took down every single one of their properties for, I think it was about 12 hours before some of it even started to get back up, and that they're going to take about a 30% hit for this quarter, and that really drives the share price down to the ground. And even though it's probably not going to be reported, most of that is due to poor and sloppy implementation of the network and systems infrastructure, as well as bad code and legacy code also that has been out there that people just forget that's even there. So one of the things that when you're building, like I mentioned, with the static application security testing, SAST, using things like Sneak, check marks, Code Guru, and then running them through other applications like SonarQube, which is a great application for doing post-code analysis. It also has some IDE hooks that are nice. You can hopefully help eliminate a lot of those issues right off the bat, as well as just writing tidier code more efficiently, and hopefully have a less latent application or a less bloated application, which gets into the next part, which is software composition analysis, which I mentioned about using third-party libraries, whether it's npm, pip, anything that you're just downloading a library to implement on a system. You should always build those libraries. Even if you're using a third-party library, you should always run those through something like SonarQube yourself. An old tool that still works really well for security, for not only security but just for sound coding, is a program called Lint that's on every Linux system known to man. And then there are SCA specific applications like Black Duck, dependency check, that go out and they hit known CVEs to look for any sort of vulnerability, as well as look for, if it's not hitting any of those lists, it would go through and actually check the code depending on what level you paid up for. But the only problem is these tools, while most of them started out free, now they're getting quite expensive. But again, if you're a casino, a government agency, something that's mission critical, and whether it's monetarily or risk, health and safety wise, it's really important to run everything you're developing through those. And then after you also have to consider the security of your repositories, which we'll get into next, and check those for. Sometimes people, while they're doing testing, they will leave passwords or personal identifying information, or crypto keys that could be used to break into the core of the system, or just steal the data or shut you down. Some people just want to shut your business down. There's somebody that I know in the country that since they wouldn't sell their company to them, that the person is attacking them in every every type of attack vector, whether it's network-based or application-based, even sending fake orders to like floods of fake orders. So so they're sending writers out, and they'll get to someplace and there's not even a building there, you know, and it's just a waste of time, waste of money, waste of resources. And so, while we talk about the security side of it, it gets into the data integrity of your coding, which goes back to sound coding practices, making sure that you're able to check for erroneous data being inputted, which also is part of one of the main attack vectors that hits most web applications would be SQL injection attacks, cross-site scripting attacks, or if it's really sloppy, you can do man-in-the-middle attacks and hijack somebody's session. That's a favorite of most hackers to leech bank accounts. There was an online gaming company that had that done with their it was their third party, but they owned a payment gateway that lost about $14 million, and it could have been just taken care of with some really simple hooks in the applications, enabling, trying to get away from TLS1 to TLS2, which we've had to deal with some of our stuff, which is hard when you're dealing with legacy clients, or you're concerned with your user base will not be able to have compatibility if it's a user facing or like a people facing application. You try to code for access for the lowest common denominator, but I don't think that people have that leisure anymore to be able to get away with that. And some of the things like Apple used to do, where they just stopped supporting things like Flash because it's buggy as hell, and people used to have very malicious apps that just leach your data, infect your computer, and all kinds of other fun stuff. Then again, when you're deploying it and you're building your infrastructure, you have to think about the way that it's going to be accessed. That you will have a security layer, and you're trying to make the smallest possible attack vector. Like we mentioned about APIs, you don't want if you can possibly do it. If you say you have an application that is hybrid and housed inside your company, but also cloud-based, and you're relying on API calls to cloud server, a lot of times those are using no encryption whatsoever, or very weak encryption that all I have to do is hack something, do some social engineering, and leave a bunch of USB keys out in front of your office and wait for somebody to install a nice little program, and then I'll steal one of your secret keys, and then I don't even have to crack the encryption. I can just watch it and be man in the middle. So when you're deploying things, whenever possible, creating IPsec tunnels with strong encryption, you have to worry about the latency effect, the effect of latency of adding those layers. So if it's something that's really mission critical, at least encapsulating it in something like a GRE tunnel or some other layer. So if somebody like me is out there trying to sniff for traffic or sniff for suckers to take their tools and their toys, that it doesn't just appear to be standard data traffic. Also, when you're using and deploying things, whenever possible, Uh, Make sure try to use non-standard ports, even if it's standard communication protocol. That it's a simple, it's hiding in plain sight type thing. But whenever possible, when you're deploying things, if you can use some sort of tunneling system, especially with hybrid applications, which are becoming, a lot of people move to the cloud and then they realize that, well, that's a point of failure, especially when you're deployed with, let's say, your server, somebody miss it, they mistakenly used a zone in Sao Paulo, Brazil, and you're in Asia, and you're relying on shaky fiber cables that fishing trawlers are going over all the time, and then you can be cut off. So people are trying. You see a lot of people going back to hybrid-based applications, and it's not that expensive and not that hard to create tunneling systems that are going to add very little latency unless you're doing something like real-time video, like certain gaming applications that were very popular here in the last year or so. Adding bits of any bit of latency makes people possibly even mistrust the integrity of the games or the data that they're seeing. But with fairly inexpensive equipment, and you can also build things to do these tunnels or the encryption that just sit in the middle, and you could use something like a Raspberry Pi. Although I wouldn't recommend it for something that's super heavy. A small firewall will, just about any small firewall, regardless of it being from Cisco, Fortinet, Palo Alto Networks, they have pretty affordable options that can add a really strong layer of security into your network, and do also composition analysis of what's inside your network, which people forget about a lot. A considerable amount of it, when you get into the mitigation, you also have to realize that, especially in certain places, you shouldn't be worried so much. You need to be worried more about some of your internal employees and their actions inside the network. So when you're deploying an application, just because it's got secure tunnels to the cloud server, if you don't have it protected on the inside of the network, a disgruntled employee, you may not hack it, may not take anything down, but he could possibly bring down your entire business for a while. Get back to the casinos. Somebody got fired in Jeju, and they didn't remove him from the building, but he had administrative access to all the systems, and he basically brought down their casino for or at least it took about 6 hours, and then the 2-hour drive just to get there, and then basically had to break into the network and reset everything. And places like Jeju are already losing $10 million a month if they can't even run their basic systems. Then they're really screwed. So it's really important to also secure and isolate your internal services from your own employees. A lot of people don't watch the watchers. The administrators themselves there's a lot of money going around and they're not getting paid at all. Barely anything at all. It's not unheard of for somebody to write something that just starts shaving little transactions off of other people's transactions. So it's important to do things like red teaming, which you basically you have your own security infrastructure, your own security team, but you want to make sure that they're on point and that you don't see anything really shady going on internally. So there's some places that we found that they realized that there's they were buying more and more bandwidth, but there was very little actual data traffic that should have been going on based on their monitoring their servers, which they were monitoring, but they weren't monitoring what else was going on, and seeing their entire network infrastructure, the servers that were on there. So it was killing their applications, but it was basically somebody decided that they were going to put a bunch of Bitcoin mining machines and things in closets, and they had no idea about their entire assets on their network. So implementing security and visibility into network infrastructure and systems infrastructure, so that you can be able to, on those application servers, that you can also see the what's going on. All of a sudden you have a clunky application. You've gone through all the software composition analysis, static application security testing. You know your code's sound, but things are still slow. Somebody may have installed a rootkit on the server and is hiding an application that's just killing your performance, or something more malicious. The only issues that you get into when you do implement things like this are impacting usability, which is very important, and that's why you have to think about going back to the thing that I keep on saying, is implementing a holistic approach to building your infrastructure, your systems, and your applications, so you have visibility, usability, and security. Because what good is security if you make things so unaccessible that either your employees won't use the applications that they're supposed to, or they can't use the applications that they're supposed to. And so building out a proper infrastructure from the ground up, thinking about security when you're designing your application and sound coding practices in the application, and then building that system that's gonna basically power it. It's really important to think about the whole system, from basically even the power and the air up. There's other we talk about application security. I wrote an article about 20 years ago now, that got published in the ACM Association, the Articles of the ACM, which is the Association for Computing Machinery, about SCADA attacks. Basically, infrastructure monitoring. That's another place that people don't think about when you're building environmental control applications. I think one of the sponsors here is Siemens or Emerson's right there. When building out the applications and the systems for the actual environment, and then putting them, not protecting those as well, and building really sloppy apps. I've seen several instances where people have hacked the environmental control systems and just killed the air conditionings, the crack units in a server room, and you basically have big hot bricks, and you're pretty much screwed unless you have a backup data center. So really thinking about the entire environment and the infrastructure as a whole is very important. Um, and then getting back to the favorite topic of is then paying attention to not only your internal network systems, but also your users, and implementing proper tools that can hopefully mitigate their own. Sometimes it's stupidity, sometimes it's malicious, sometimes it's a little bit of both, and hopefully have awareness and visibility into behaviors that start changing, or systems that are changing for no apparent reason other than somebody's just disgruntled, or they're actually going after some data, or they want to take down your business. Um, let's see. I know I have an hour, but I don't know if I'm going to make it through an hour. I was hoping this was going to be a live, and I was going to go to SMX today to work a room. I do crowd work better, like a comedian. But so the let's see, the environment. I talked about that. Uh, the only other thing is and which I briefly mentioned on is making sure your I saw Cyril say something. Oh no, subtitles. Yeah, the when you're going into deploying things, that you're also using the most common, or the closest possible resource that you should be using. Um, there, you're adding, if you're using things like Alibaba Cloud, AWS, Azure, and you have your zones all over the place. Unless there's a good reason, it's very important to make sure those are as close to home or in the home base of where your customers are, for latency, for reliability, because sometimes the network, the internet goes down, especially it's more fun in the Philippines, right? The internet is quite shaky here, and if you're not relying on the most stable and the closest possible infrastructure, you could be doing yourself a world of hurt. So, and then the last thing wanted to brush upon is that we're talking about mitigating attacks, but there also is, it's if somebody wants your data, they're going to get it. One of the approaches that I've always had is trying to make it as untouchable long enough to make it irrelevant in certain cases, because they're going to get it eventually. But in certain places like the Philippines, Macau, data privacy, if you have a breach, you also need to think about how to find that hole. And in certain places like this one, you actually need to report it to the government. If you don't have a actual framework, data privacy framework, and a post a leak, not framework, but a plan that's filed with the government, I've seen them put down 100 million peso fines to companies, and for those companies that did have their framework actually registered with the government, that when they had serious breaches of data, personal identifying information, and like financial loss, but they had their plans registered, and the government saw that they actually were responsible. They had something to go after, and they gave them basically slaps on the wrist and gave them time to shore up and track down the points of attack and deal with that without basically shutting down the business. Some people think that also going to things like blockchain are going to improve the security and reliability of systems, which it very well can. But in certain industries and certain jurisdictions, you're violating the law by even using blockchain, because even though it's encrypted, you're making, unless the entire blockchain is inside the physical building or the organization unit, by having that another block or another chain link in the blockchain, you're transmitting personal data or financial data across sometimes international lines, certain jurisdictions, certain industries, even if it's the same parent company, but you're a sub company. For example, in Macau, the Sands, when they fired their CEO, their data center, their main data center, was in another property. So they took the hard drive from the Venetian to the Sands, the main Sands Macau, and that was basically 100 million Hong Kong dollar fine, and they almost lost their gaming license. Because they didn't realize that the data privacy law, even though it was an employee, it still had to reside in the building or the corporate substructure. It physically had to reside in that. Certain what was it, Facebook or Google just got done by the European Union for violating the same thing that they were supposed to have. Based on the GDPR, the German data privacy law, that is probably the only one that's worse than here. They were supposed to have all the government data stored on servers physically in Germany and in a specific zone, and they screwed up and they started transmitting it to servers in the U.S. and South America, and they almost got shut down for who knows how long, but it would be a massive impact to their business. So,
Brady, we actually have questions about the government. This is from Ross. She's in a government setup. So can you describe the procedures in place for continuous monitoring of applications to detect and respond to security threats and vulnerabilities in real time, which can be adopted by the government?
oh, and that's a pretty good question, because a lot of government agencies, and it's not just here, rely on really ancient legacy systems that the you not even work, even though the focus is on application security, but just monitoring for performance and using tools like PRTG for network monitoring, for instance monitoring, for basically data set performance. You can have a massive impact that's not even security related, based on just having that. So certain companies try not to pump any company or product, except for Orange and Bronze. We're hiring. I'm just told to say that. But the shameless plug. Sorry, Kellen. No orange shirt. But the certain companies like Fortinet, which they have programs that sit on top of their network and firewall infrastructure, like Fortinet Analyzer, and will watch for anomalies in the data that's coming out of the system, and where, like I mentioned, where it could be that it will analyze and start building signatures with heuristics and basically fingerprinting your applications for performance and security breaches. So things like Fortinet Analyzer, Palo Alto, Cisco. I said a product name, but they're they would be called basically expert systems that use heuristics to start learning and building up not only a total visibility, so you can see your attack surface space, but to see if your, say, one server is always only using certain ports for its data, and all of a sudden it starts having data coming out of another port that usually would be somebody's put some spyware or a malicious backdoor, or an administrator got lazy and just created some way to get in and not have to get off his butt and go to the server room or something like that. But the most of the major network systems providers and security providers, F5 is another good brand that does a lot of this, and they were one of the pioneers in doing this, building up fingerprinting. Also, for resiliency, these applications will dynamic. A lot of these applications, like again, I'll mention a brand F5. It builds resiliency by automatically seeing that there's a bottleneck or some sort of throttling of data and rebuild the network paths for it. So I kind of dancing around the answer to that, because well, in a lot of conferences I go to, they don't really want you pushing products, right? So I don't know what the rules are here, but be happy to have an offline conversation about that. So yeah, I hope I answered that to a decent level.
I'm pretty sure you have, Brady. We actually have
Does anybody have a nosebleed? I saw somebody asking about subtitles.
Yeah, there was. But then everybody was saying, go, Brady. That's from Orange and Bronze. So they are very supportive. But we also have a question here from Jim Zanqueta. Asked, given that the Philippines is increasingly becoming a hotspot for cybersecurity attacks, how can we as developers play a proactive role in enhancing the cybersecurity consciousness of Filipinos and ensure the digital safety of our nation?
I've had actual conversations about this very topic, and it's not just becoming a hotspot for cybersecurity attacks; it's the hotspot for originating of cybersecurity attacks. So the WannaCry virus, or the worm WannaCry, came out of it was traced back to La Union, I think, like a university out in La Union, and that brought down systems all over the world. When kids are bored and broke, they'll come up with some creative way to use their powers for evil, not good. The way, it's kind of a generational approach, I think, to increase awareness that people need to know that their actions have the consequences, and they can have consequences. like simple things like a lot of people you talk about this is a very Filipino thing, loving to be on social media and take photos of what you're doing, and they stupidly take pictures of their airplane tickets and their passports. Yeah, and it takes about 30 seconds if I have somebody's their information from their passport and their plane ticket, that it now becomes my name on that plane ticket, and I'm going on vacation, not them, and they're really pissed off. Or the flight's canceled. There's a lot of maliciousness that it can happen just in the same way. So it's important to increase awareness of not picking up, like I mentioned. If I really wanted to, if I couldn't get into a system in a really in a direct approach, I would just sit outside. I'd sit outside and watch where everybody goes to eat, and start throwing USB keys around, or things that said, "Oh, free application, free." People are click happy here. We had a conversation with one of our clients that, something that I would never do, and it's kind of unheard of in a Western country, that you get a link in an SMS and people will just click on it rather than think about it, look at it. I would say paying attention is one of the main ways to increase cybersecurity in this country. And really, I mean, it's gotta kind of push a little bit more common sense. If something's too good to be true, it probably is too good to be true, right? If you see a bunch of USB keys in a pile, or I attach it to a flyer that says, install this app, or we all get. I think I get more SMSs with BS links to stuff now that the SIM cards are registered than I did before, and basically they should be almost like there should be some sort of government approach, and I know the DICT has Cybersecurity Month, but kind of like what they do with the vaccine awareness when you go up north, because polio's back in the Philippines, they have posters about the information. Don't even like Singapore, they have posters in a lot of places. No crime doesn't mean no crime, and there's little tidbits around where people have to sit, like bus terminals. Bus terminals is a great one. On the train, you're stuck in a captive audience. The government should put up information with just little tidbits, make them sound kind of catchy, so somebody remembers that they shouldn't, think before you link. Hey, Adam, can you go copyright that phrase, please? It's actually pretty good. I'll pat myself on the back. But this is why I like a crowd, because I can work the audience. But I think it really is. The government has a responsibility to do it, and it doesn't take a lot. Just making people aware and to think when they're a captive audience. Anyway, of course, most people are on their phones, so maybe mandate something with the telcos, that because the telcos love to hijack other people's ads. They do man in the middle attacks, hijack other people's ads, and then push their own ads for their own revenue. That's that is an actual attack, and that's based on weak API security that people get away with that, and it's usually the telcos that are doing it. It can be quite lucrative if you can bust somebody's API and start implementing your own ads in there. But so the either spends the money or they force the telcos to use some of their power to push those ads every once in a while. Just like there's security awareness platforms like called Nobi4 or several of them that you have to go through for compliance reasons and stuff like that. But every once in a while, have an ad that's pushed to the phone because people are always on their phones, not paying attention. Yeah, instead of the security side, look up, you're about to get hit by a car. But they can push that out. I think companies have a big responsibility internally to have little posters and little tidbits like that internally that make people aware. The only place that I see that I've done work for every branch of the government here, and I've been in probably the most secure, some of the most secure buildings in this country, which really wouldn't be what you would assume them to be. But the only place you see those type of information is casinos, actually, because a casino is like a central bank. They print money with your chips. Everything's all about finance, right? They even things like piggybacking or tailgating on somebody coming in. If you see somebody not wearing a badge, they could be there to hack you. Not saying that I've ever done that, wink, wink. But thank God for statute of limitations. No, the joke long. I just saw Adam's think before you link hashtag ONB. Woo! But there needs to be corporate responsibility, not just government responsibility, because everywhere nobody should. The government only has their best interests, and not just here, not just poo-pooing on the Philippines, but the governments always have their own best interests, or their department's best interests, whether it's here or Singapore or something like that. So having corporate responsibility, putting information like that. You always see health things, but you never see posters about data security. It's called virus on a computer too. So that was a long-winded answer. Sorry. I tell stories. I'm Irish.
It's okay. I mean, we all get lessons from all the stories that you've been sharing. But there's actually another question from Jojo. He's from ING Hubs, and he's asking how to effectively deal with vulnerabilities reported by OSA scans in the context of IT risk audit, insisting that all vulnerabilities need to be resolved as soon as possible.
That's a good question, and that's also stupid when people won't think about proper. Again, we get into usability. I've sat through meetings with some of my colleagues, hi guys, where one of the client's internal audit team has a list of vulnerabilities, and they're insisting that all of them be fixed when they don't even know the parameters of the application. And that's why it's a holistic approach again. I'm sorry, I keep on saying the same word, but if your IT security team also doesn't have a holistic knowledge of the systems and the applications, then they don't know that, like I mentioned, getting away from using like TLS1 for encryption of web traffic. A lot of people here have really old phones, or they don't update their systems. I'm looking at some of my own colleagues. We're fixing that, by the way. They never run Windows updates. You walk by the computer and there's there's a notification that they don't even bother minimizing that says you have 400 Windows updates to install, but sometimes you can't update those systems because of the usability and your client base, your target market, so to speak. Again, you have to have the lowest common denominator, and you have to run a business or provide a service. And I think that usually, if you document things, here's the real answer. Sorry, if you document things that have been discussed properly and methodically, so you have a clear vision of your infrastructure, a holistic view of your environment. Like, we decided to use TLS version 1 because based on the sample logs, that 80% of the traffic was coming from clients that could not support TLS 2 or higher. So you want to make money or run a business or provide a government service, or do you want to shut everything down because you have such a narrow focus and you don't even bother? It's If you have it documented, you can present that business case to even the most stubborn nerd. And nerds are very territorial, and they don't play well with others, especially data security nerds. Most of them don't have personalities. They sit in little caves with drinking Mountain Dew and Red Bull, and don't really socialize very well. So, and yes, I'm a nerd. But if you have that information documented, even if they know that there's a vulnerability, that you have a business use case that you can easily present. And then there's a lot of different ways to skin a cat. Like I said, you may have to rely on some some 40-year-old COBOL API on an AS400 that still runs your financial platform, and your business is relying on it, but you can encapsulate that in other ways to protect it, so that it's not exposed, that the service space is still closed up. Create a business use case, and tell people to open their eyes and have them use the app. Have them. That's the fun one. Okay, turn it off. Some of my casino clients. Oh, we already have a firewall for the IT systems. Let's use that for the surveillance system. When in certain jurisdictions, here is one, Pagcor. They don't care about what's going on in the casino at all. They're looking at the money transactions. If they can't see the money transactions, the CRA in Singapore, they actually have a list of how much they fine Marina Bay Sands and Resorts World every year for data downtime. So you go, okay, smart guy, I've presented you with the business use case. You turn it off, you use that shared firewall, and you do what you want, and then tell me how I'm going to use this application. I've been that guy too. I've been that jerk, and somebody physically shows me a piece of hardware. Okay, how do I do this with these two devices? Physically, it was impossible. So I had to create a solution that got around that still allowed for usability of the core applications. So, there's a lot of pieces to that answer. Hopefully, I answered it properly.
I hope you got
Can you
the answer that they wanted. We have I think we still have time for another question. Let's take one.
Wow, I've actually filled up an hour. Woo!
You have. There's a lot of questions that you can actually answer. There's still more, so perhaps other delegates might reach out to you and ask.
I answer questions and give advice, except marital advice. So just don't do it.
Right. So yes, Titus is asking, what's good practice have you implemented to balance work disruptions and usability degradation in software whenever a new security layer is adopted?
Hi guys. I just basically took down the entire network for about a week, the other week, because we're building up something from scratch. But usually, usually the best way to do that is by benching whatever you're going to implement, sandboxing environments, creating, I forget the latest catchphrase. Adam, what's the latest catchphrase that, like your shift left stuff, or for basically creating micro test applications? I've been doing this for years, where I'll fire up a virtual machine, or using virtual machine Docker. It doesn't cost, AWS and the cloud systems can get expensive, but it's if you're talking about disrupting an entire business, it doesn't cost that much to fire up a bunch of machines and a virtual environment. You can also run virtual switches. Cisco, Fortinet, Palo Alto, Extreme all have their own virtual switching systems that you can implement in most cloud platforms. You know, that you can actually build up that environment and test it, put it on a bench, make sure it's sound, and then you can hopefully minimize the amount of downtime. And if you're implementing new security measures, just like when you're rolling out a new application, sometimes downtime is inevitable, but if you're actually coding the application, including certain hooks that allow for interoperability, so people don't feel that the application's even changed, and that can be taken off by either by removing a library and not having to do a hard reset of a system, but or using there are very, very expensive tools like F5 makes some great stuff for load balancing and deployment of hardware and software, where you're deploying things out virtually or in the cloud, and then it's migrating down to your actual on-prem infrastructure without people even knowing it, because it's balancing that traffic and even shaping it or modifying modifying the data and API calls that are going out based on things like regex to modify that data that's going out to the old system to the new system, without having to actually bring down either one, and then you just cut the cord. So, hope that answered it.
Okay. All right, I hope you got your answer there, Sir Titus.
Yeah, but feel free to reach out to me. Like I said, I answered most questions except for life lessons and marriage advice, except for just don't do it.
So apart from those two, attendees, please feel free to reach out to Brady. But there's a question again from Jojo. Jojo is very participative along with Rox. But the question is, what's your recommendation for effectively implementing shift-left security that provides fast feedback loop for software engineers to resolve insecure codes and vulnerabilities directly from their local dev environment?
Let me read that again. So I stopped at the certain term, and I'm sure Adam is laughing because he knows exactly what it was. The best thing that I can think of for providing a feedback loop for software engineers is using those tools like Sneak that I mentioned. Sonar Cube's great for that, where you have both IDE and you're tying it not just into your network infrastructure, or not just into your development environment, but you're trying it into some of the network infrastructure, providing providing data, like when I talked about latency, adding latency, that you say things like photo analyzer, where it's a photo analyzer wouldn't do that, but there are certain platforms that you can tie back into your development environment that while they're developing it, that's analyzing that traffic, and you have your old fingerprint and your old performance metrics, like in network video jitter, that your average latency, your response time was 4 milliseconds based on your old software platform, but based on the new signature, your latency is 10 milliseconds or something like that. There are tools that tie back into things like SonarQube. Blanking on some of the products, but tying those platforms into your IDE, so your developers have to use them. Then tying them into the infrastructure so they can actually get some alerts, because not every, some, again, nerds are very territorial, but sometimes it's good to share with the developer that his application is going to trash your network before he actually does. So, enabling them to see certain RMON performance data off the network, or NetFlow data, SFlow data, which breaks down applications by their signatures, by different metrics, and then flushing that back into their development environments, or even dashboards that they have. Certain company that I did a lot of work for, that basically they were doing 3.9 billion pesos per month in revenue, but it was 100% online. And so when they released a new application, I quantified that it was, what was it? It was something like it was something like 10 million pesos per minute of cost for interruption. So we built dashboards that they could see some of the network data. They could see the throughput, the latency. They could see those metrics, and it would get really annoying unless you have really good headphones, if you where you couldn't ignore it, tying into nice audible alarms. So that's what I would do. That's what I have done. So, and my way is the right way.
Okay. Is that always the truth, the fact? My way is the right way. But anyway, we actually have an out, right?
Yeah. What's that? Yeah, I was going to say, don't. I have some horrible comments that I always make, so I'm watching my the mixed audience. So
okay,
yeah.
It's okay. All right, you don't have to worry about it. Thank you so much for addressing the questions from the delegates. Other attendees still have a lot of questions, so they might reach out to you. You can
Please
always,
do.
yeah, you can always.
I would have rather just had a question and answer session than ramble on without an audience, because then I do like to tell stories.
Yeah, I know you said that's why I joined you already, so that we can address the questions. However,
Yeah.
I'm gonna ask you for a couple of seconds to pose for a photo op, like a picture. So I'm gonna be turning my camera off.
Wacky, right?
I'll be right back once the picture is taken. Please.
And just for Krishna, Orange and Bronze is hiring. worries, Edgar. Hope it was informative.
Thank you once again for being here with us, Brady. We really
Yeah,
appreciate
it
your
was a little
knowledge.
it was a little frustrating.
I know it has been a long winding road, right, until you got here. But I'd also like to
Yeah,
acknowledge the presence of Mr. Calvin Legaspi, the chairman and chief scientist of Orange and Bronze, and the CEO, Mr. Adam Breen of Orange and Bronze. So hi, 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 Sir Adam. Um, Again, Sir Brady, thank you so much for being here. And that's all the time that we have for this session. So again, let's thank Brady with clapping emojis or hearts out there. So guys, see you in the next session.
yeah,
Bye.
yeah. What do